everybody here. But today's hearing is on snow removal services. We will start with the presentation by staff and Bob Epstein presenting just what we do and how we do it. I would ask that you hold your questions till after the presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions about that. And then after the questions, Bertram, you have a presentation to make also?
Yeah, I can present.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. So with that, Eric, I'll turn it over to you, and you can introduce your staff. And
Sure. Basically, this is presentation's a little bit long, so I encourage people to take notes if you have any questions that you want to ask us at the end. But I have our subject matter expert, our SME, our lead snow removal operator, Dave Waddle, and obviously everybody knows Rick and myself, and hopefully we'll be able to answer all the questions you may have today about snow removal. So with that, the objectives of the workshop: we're going to provide the snow removal history, as was requested by Director Dornbrook. We're going to present an operational overview, essentially, of how our system works. We're going to review the GPS. We're going to examine our pricing methodology. And finally, we'll discuss some efficiency and accuracy improvements that we recommend or have already been made. So, a brief history. Spring of 1995, that was the first time this was discussed by the KMPUD board. In 2001 to 2003, a feasibility study was undertaken, and beginning in 2003, the district began offering snow removal services. There was special legislation passed by the state to allow us to do that. It's codified in California Public Utility Code 16486. We had 4 HOAs in 2003 and 22 HOAs last year. We had 8 driveways in 2005, which is when we started taking on private driveways, and 58 today. We've made about $1.3 million in equipment purchases over that time, and about $1.1 million in vehicle maintenance shop construction.
You have 58 driveway contracts?
That is correct.
Because you do way more driveways than that.
yeah,
You're correct. 58 driveway contracts. That is correct.
74 in the East Meadows alone.
Right.
74. Okay. Well, that was just a question you had yesterday. So, operational overview. As Director Dornbrook requested, I talked with our council. This is an optional service. It's not a utility service. We can use any pricing methodology. It's not subject to 218 process or a rate study. So he did confirm all that. So the components of our snow removal are administrative, as you saw with Kelly's presentation on budget. There's been quite a bit of time dealing with the administrative side the last couple months. Equipment maintenance and repair, snow stake installation and removal. We also store the snow stakes for all of the customers. We don't charge for that, although it takes space in our shop, and our mechanic would like to see them all removed. But we still have them all there, and then, of course, snow removal. And there's a picture of not all. There's a picture of some of the snow stakes. You can see 2 racks there of our snow stake storage in our vehicle maintenance shop. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dave.
Okay, well, the next one is a basic question. When does equipment operate? Well, the simple answer to that question is when necessary. It's before, during, after storms for lots of different reasons. Before storm, depending on time of season, we could be doing it to prepare for more snow coming. We could be preparing for drainage clearing in wet storms. Obviously, during storms is pretty easy. We're clearing roads and driveways, making access for everybody to get around the valley, and storing snow when we're moving it from one place to another to get it to the proper spot. Equipment moves around when we're doing training, and training can last all season long. We train a lot in the early seasons, but without snow it's hard to train in different ways. So even like years like last year, We did what we call dry land training, trying to get seasonal operators up to speed in different contracts, because every contract poses its own challenges. But then like last year, we didn't get most of our snow till March, so operators have had some training, but they haven't maybe dealt with real snowstorms. So years like last year, we're still training in March at times, trying to get people up to speed to be more efficient. Incoming weather. We do a really good job at the district, as in looking at weather. We use multiple weather sites to try to plan on what the storm's going to bring us. Because heavy snow, wet snow, different types of snow, what type of equipment we're going to start out with, and personnel needed. Low temperatures can be good and bad. It turns snow into ice. As we know, we live in the Sierras, which we have beautiful, warm bluebird powder days, but on those warm days, if the snow comes in late in the evening, there could be a couple inches on there, which used to be below requirements, but we would leave that on there and try to save money. And then in the evenings, when it got warm, in the afternoons, it would turn to slush. And then in the evening, when the clouds go away and the storm goes away, it gets really cold, and that turns to ice, which presents its own challenges for people walking, driving, and equipment at that point. And so sometimes we will go out in the early mornings once it freezes like that, and we'll remove snow less than a few inches just to get that off of there. So as soon as it does warm up with the sunshine, it melts off, and we don't have those ice safety issues. Because it does create a huge safety issue for driving, walking, and even equipment. We have heavy equipment and stuff, and the concept is it doesn't slide around, big chains and stuff, but on ice, it makes a huge difference. As in, too much pressure on a blade or the blower box will put it onto the cutting edge on those things, which goes across the asphalt, and it works like an ice skate. So if you put too much pressure on there, you're going to raise your wheels and your chains off, and you're going to slide around. Very difficult to control them on ice, especially on different inclines and different driveways and roadways, especially on steep areas, which is a huge safety concern. Inspection of the unplowed areas due to obstacles is pretty normal. Some things we can see and not see during storms, so we have to go back and inspect things so we don't do damage and don't hurt the equipment operators or cause property damage. Why does the equipment stop sometimes? Lots of different reasons for that. A common one is equipment failure or damage. Can come from maintenance unknown, can be caused by a lot of different things, mechanical or breakdowns, as in doing damage, breaking things when we're out there doing snow removal, by hidden obstacles, cars, trash, wood, uneven concrete, lots of different things. Even ice and snow can cause that stuff to happen. Safety is a huge concern at the district, especially running heavy equipment in snowstorms and blizzards. We have lots of cars driving around between people going back and forth to the general store or the chairlifts. We have shuttle buses from Vail that seem to drive very quickly through the associations that we have to watch for. People walking and pets. It helps us if people are considerate when they see equipment coming through and not walk down the narrow parts of the roadways. If you see equipment coming, pull over into a parking pad and don't slow us down. Help us continue to be efficient and do snow removal. Poor visibility, internal and external. Another concept is we can actually see out there all the time. I think, as most people know, driving their cars in Kirkwood in different situations, lots of fogging inside the cabs, and just wind in blizzards. We operate equipment in a blizzard, and then we have a snow-making machine that blows the snow on the front of it right in front of our windshield, so it makes it very difficult in a lot of conditions. Visibility interior can be moisture. If you have to get in and out to fix damage or shear pins on your machine, any type of moisture on your clothes when you get back in is going to fog your machine up right away. So there's times where you have to wait for visibility to be able to provide snow removal safely. Sometimes we have discussions with customers in the field, people asking for specific things or asking questions about what's going on. And then just staff availability. Sometimes, depending on staff and days off, we don't have as many people to run all equipment, so they'll be in the shop. This is just a photo, one of many, of a vehicle not marked in a parking pad, which, as we all know, it just slows down efficiency. When they're marked well, we can see them, we can determine it's a car, we can determine if we need to get there or not, and be able to provide more efficiency in snow removal and do less damage. Next photo again is a vehicle improperly marked. Once again, it just helps us and our operators. Some are long-time operators, they're better at it. Some are seasonal operators. Just helps us move along through the contracts efficiently, do our job without having to come back day after day to try to clean the same areas.
You know, Dave, you were talking about, back to that last picture. You know, this picture, you can actually see the car, you know, looks like a small pyramid, but during storms, or as he was mentioning, with snow blowing around from the machine, the operator really cannot see this. So if we accidentally hit this vehicle, you know, clearly it takes the machine down, but the time, the administrative time behind the scenes to manage the claim, get it to our insurance company, pay the deductible, is huge. And we do our best not to hit anything, especially vehicles, but I guarantee you every year it's going to be a small, low profile Audi, BMW, something that's expensive to fix that we're going to run into. And so we encourage the HOAs to follow their own procedures and policies and make sure that people have bamboo and they mark the cars, or they remove snow off the cars so we can see it easily. But I'm the guy that has to go out and do the reporting, and it's so hard to tell somebody who's having a great time during their vacation, hey, we hit your car, and oh, by the way, you can't drive your car out of here, we need to get you a rental car. And dealing with all that is just, it's huge. So just wanted to make that comment.
The next one is just another example of a house that has a lot of different hazards and challenges. It's a steep driveway depending on snow and icy conditions. Not a lot of snow storage. On the right side, we have what they call early season snow storage by the county, which comes to about 20%, so we go through that very quickly. The snow needs to be touched twice in this spot. If we blow it in the end, in the picture you can't see, there's another house there. You're starting to bury that house and driveway, so really the snow goes to the right to start with, and then it goes actually out into the road, so it can be blown once again to the other side of the street where you can't see, which is a big open space, is where snow should go. Just helps if you blow it into the small area on the left, early season, that's going to build up so much that later on in the season with a couple hundred inches, you won't be able to blow over that. So then it just changes what you can do. So starting out a season, thinking about a big year versus a small year goes a long way. Just another photo of just challenges that we run into here in Kirkwood. I think this was 2 years ago during a really windy time. Trees in the roadway, just challenges that limit snow removal and just slow down the process. And as we all know, different snow types require level of effort, just like skiing, riding, or even shoveling. Dry powder up here, what they call cold smoke, is great to ski, easier for us to plow, but presents its own challenges. When it comes out of a blower, when it's too light a snow, it comes out into a spray. So in windy conditions and stuff, it's really hard to control the snow. You can be aiming directly in front of you or a little bit to the right, and with a strong wind, that cold snow will move 20 to 30 feet sometimes. We'll be aiming not at a pathway in front of it or behind it, and the wind actually takes it there. So cold snow presents its own challenges, as in wet snow and heavy snow. Wet, heavy snow takes longer to push. It's harder on equipment, requires more diesel because the machines are working harder. And the wet snow, you can't control it as much. When you're blading around, it doesn't move with your blade. You can articulate your blade, it just goes where it wants to go. It'll stick to the blade and release at certain times when it wants to. So it's a lot harder to control. easier to blow. It comes out of the chute in more of a block form, which stays together, which we can control a lot better and put it where we want it a little better. So they all present their own challenges. As we know, wind in Kirkwood, wind brings us storms and wind takes storms out of here. So it's something we deal with all the time. So even if it's a clear, nice day out there, wind loading and snow drifts are something that we deal with in a lot of the associations and driveways. And then ice itself. Ice is not what we're designed to remove, so it's a very difficult thing for us. What we try to do is look at weather and look at temperatures and try to attack the ice as best as possible. We'll go out and we will sand hill areas to get them up to flatter areas, and we try to use the sunshine in the afternoons or when it is in the right areas as an alignment, try to get the most of it off and let the sunshine melt it. The effects of rain and snow and slush really changes everything. Water and snow don't mix with cold iron. Something that people think we go in to blow snow, and if we hit snow and water, what it does immediately is freezes to the impellers of the snow blowers, and it'll create an imbalance on them, which will clog them right away, and it'll break shear pins, which require operators to get out of the equipment and repair it, which is downtime, and getting snow on them, which reflects as in fogging and stuff in the machines. So it's a big impact on what we do. Packed snow to vehicle traffic, once again, it's not heavy wet snow, it's not dry powder. It takes a lot more effort and energy for the loaders to peel that up and to get it blown. Anytime you move snow once or twice, it takes the air out of it, and every time you take the air out of it, it requires more energy for the equipment to move it again. So anytime you move it more than once, it takes a lot more energy. Different types of snow causes different challenges. Different equipment is built for different things. Loaders are made for moving snow to the sides. Snow blowers are made to move it from the sides into snow storage areas. And every type of snow is different. We have two different styles of blowers. The small blowers that we use, which we call trackless blowers, they're two-stage blowers. They have an impeller on the front that feeds it into the main impeller that actually throws it, which is a lot easier. It feeds better into the machine, but doesn't blow it quite as far. Our bigger blower is a single-stage blower. It's one stage, it feeds itself and throws it out. Doesn't feed as well in wet or snow. So at times, depending on the type of snow, we will use different pieces of equipment. When it's really wet, it's hard for us to use our bigger equipment to blow, so you'll see the smaller trackless blowers that are two-stage. They'll be used a little bit more on the sides of the road versus just driveways and stuff, because it's a equipment issue. It's more efficient and faster. And we try to use the temperatures once again in our favor. Sometimes if it's a really wet storm, we'll look at weather. If it's going to be clear and obviously get colder, we will let snow sit on the sides a little bit until the next morning when it gets colder, and it actually blows a lot better with the more efficient machinery. And all that affects time impacts, on how we do it and when we do it. Other issues we deal with is veil, not so much on the west side and east side because there are specific contracts, but down in the commercial areas, we interact with veil. We have shared snow storages, and just that creates its own challenges with veil. Homeowners, it helps with a lot of communication when we're doing snow removal to shovel driveways, decks and stuff. Well, it is snowing versus when it's not snowing. We staff up heavily during storm cycles, and then during clear areas, we have to give days off. It helps eliminate overtime, so any communication is really good. If we can get the driveways and decks and stuff shoveled, if that's what's going to happen in our snow areas, while it's snowing, we don't have to go back and we don't have to drive around and spend more time addressing these things to get people in and out of their driveways and roadways. So it helps to communicate a lot on that side, so we don't have to keep going back and cleaning the areas. vehicles in parking pads, cul-de-sacs and driveways, multiple days and storms is one of our bigger issues. And each contract provides its own challenges. West side and east side. West side has driveways and parking pads. The east side was designed to have all driveways. Parking pads present a huge issue for us, especially on the west side, of cars not following policy, staying too long where we have to go back multiple times to clear the areas to make room for parking for the next storms and during those storms. Cul-de-sacs are huge for us. We have huge equipment that turn around in these things. It's not just fire safety for the fire engines and stuff, because that's how they turn around in cul-de-sacs, but it inhibits and impedes snow removal from turning. We have to make more moves. There's not a lot of snow storage in cul-de-sacs. So when people park in the cul-de-sacs, it's very difficult for us to clear them. Driveways and multiple days of storms, it just helps us not have to go back and continue to drive through the contracts and look for snow removal. If we can go through, clear everything the best we can as we're going through and not have to go back multiple times, it's just more efficient for everybody.
The next three pictures for you.
What's that?
I skipped the next three pictures for you since you were talking about it.
Oh, okay. And then just another example of cars parked in a cul-de-sac. One of the big issues we have is people don't want to park their vehicles in their driveways so they can be cleared. For some reason, it seems like there's a common issue of people don't park their cars in their garages for some reason, and they want their driveways to be cleared, so they'll park in cul-de-sacs where, as in this example, this is where the snow has to go in this contract. So when they do that, we have to change how we do snow removal, retrain people, and they have to make more decisions. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you park into your driveway, let us clear the roads, and then move your cars. We will do the snow removal in the driveways. By parking them in the cul-de-sacs, it's hard for us to get around, and at times we can't do the snow removal.
All right, so we're going to move on to GPS now.
Quick question. You want to do the roads first, then the driveways later? That's how you do it?
We're actually going to get to that a little bit later in the presentation, but we're going to be changing some methodology that is what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
So just a little bit about GPS, and Bob, I'll be looking to you to chime in with any additional comments. So how is GPS data collected? It's based on the entry and exit of landmarks, and you see an example of some landmarks, a HOA landmark as well as driveway landmarks within it. So the landmarks are processed by matching the entry and exit to a particular event or a particular landmark.
What's a landmark?
A landmark is a defined boundary in which we perform snow removal. Yeah. So GPS detects when we're in a particular landmark based on the lat and longe of the boundaries of that landmark, and then reports it through FleetTrack, and then it's processed through report server. We merge multiple events within multiple entries within a set time. We remove driveways from HOA events, and we optionally report completion to customer if they've signed up for that reporting on kmpd.com. So this is a graph that shows the driveway versus HOA allocation, the percentage of time that we are doing percentage of plowing time in driveways that are within the HOAs by the four largest HOA contracts, or the contracts that have the driveways within them essentially. And you can see it varies, between about 10% and 30% on average, with some peaks and peak storms. Anything you want to add to that, Bob?
Well, let me explain what's on this chart. So if you look at the dates on the bottom, we have storm events. And a storm event is it's determined by Jesse. So every morning we measure the snow at the flagpole here. We put that on. And then we try to find out for a snow event, when did it start snowing, and when did the equipment finish cleaning up from that storm. And as Dave mentioned, it could be several days after the snow has finished. So at the bottom we have all of the plow events that occurred in last season lined up there. And then what we have on this is when a equipment, and this is always the track list T1 through T6, when they are in driveways, when they're doing working with driveways, this is the percentage time they're in the driveway versus the time when they're not in the driveway but still in the HOA. One of the questions that came up is, does the equipment just spend their time in the driveways, and is the HOA getting charged for travel time in between? That was one of the questions that Carolyn brought up a couple of months ago when we started. So this looks at that as a percentage of time, and so you can see that most of it depends on the HOA. One of the hardest ones to do is the one I'm in, which is Juniper Ridge. That most of the time, between 10 and 20% of the time is in the driveways, and 80% is in the HOA. And I'll ask Dave to comment on what they're doing within that. But the fact is that as you plow the driveway, you're also cleaning up the street at the same time. So most of the time in this is still servicing the HOA and the street nearby. You can see there's a big exception to that in Juniper Ridge. It went up to 44% in that February storm.
Is that the blue color?
That's the blue color. You can see at the bottom, East Meadows is black,
I just can't read
Juniper
it.
Ridge is blue, KMA is green, and then Palisades is orange. And those are the 4 HOAs for which there are driveways that are serviced within the HOA. So that's why those 4 are showing. So what we're trying to demonstrate on this is that a majority of the time when we're working on driveways, the same equipment is working on the HOA. And Dave, I'd invite you to comment any further.
As an efficiency, what we'd like to do is we don't just pick the plow up and move on. As my old boss used to say, it's not made of gold. So you want to get it on the ground. If you're moving, you should be moving snow with it. So what we try to do is from contract or driveway to driveway is to blow a side of the road. The smaller blowers can't take as much snow as the bigger blowers, but they can take, normally there's a berm on each side of the road. One will be bigger, one will be smaller. The tractors will try to cut a couple feet off of that as they're traveling back and forth from driveway to driveway. So they're efficient in moving snow and widening the road at the same time.
Let me mention one other thing on that I forgot to mention on that chart. You can get very different answers by choosing your end date. So if you look, and this is one of the places where it'll probably differ with what Bertrand tried to do with his. If you pick an end date of when it stopped snowing, it might not have been plowed yet. So what we did on these is Jessica put in the start dates, but in the analysis, we actually went back and make sure that the storm event covered the plowing that occurred after the snow stopped falling. So this chart looked pretty different, and the others did. If you only look at the amount of snow and say, well, it snowed 22 inches on this day, and we just show this day, you can get very different answers. So we attempted here to show the entire plowing related to that storm's activities.
It's a pretty tight distribution, 42 to 44%.
42 to 44% what?
Of the time spent in driveways. Isn't that the range?
Well, it's from 0. You can see that there was a 0 in Juniper Ridge on January,
Okay.
and then there was a 43% that occurred in March. But most of the numbers fall within the 10 to 30%.
Okay,
If you look at the
I'm just not
distribution of
reading
that,
it.
most of it is 10 to 30%.
So moving on to snow removal across storms, there'll be 2 slides here. One's for the largest HOAs and then one for the next 8 largest. How snow removal is, and obviously larger HOAs take more time in terms of minutes. The y-axis is minutes, but it's generally a proportional. Everybody's seeing snow removal about the same time and proportional to the level of effort for the relative HOAs. Anything you want to add to this one, Bob, or do you want me to go to the next one?
Well, just a couple of things on this. Obviously, the 2 big ones is the orange which is Kirkwood, the KMA, and then black, which is East Meadows. Generally speaking, the storms in the first part of the year weren't very large, so the numbers don't have a lot of variation. You see big variations in the large storms near the end of the year, and I guess the point behind this is just historically it just takes a lot more time to do the west side than it does on the east side, and this illustrates this. But this is one of the suggestions I picked up from Bertrand's excellent commentary, which is to say one of the ways to look for anomalies is to say, is there anomalies by storm? So we tried to do here, these are the same storm buckets, is say, is there, do things get inverted in weird places? And in fact, you might find a point that just doesn't make sense within this, and so if we look at this example, so the first one was the 8 HOAs that had the most minutes last year. This one is the next 8. And so obviously the fonts are too small to see, but you can see there's this huge exception that's sticking up there in the 4th slot. Okay, that's clearly a GPS error. That used way more time than it should have. And one of the things that we've learned from this experiment, I want to use this opportunity to thank KMA, because it's forced us, well, I'll say forced, I mean, it's a good idea to do, to just look at this every way we can and say, are there anomalies? And if the anomalies, can we find them sooner, and can we correct them? And so there's a perfect example of an anomaly that if we had checked after each storm, which is one of the recommendations to read ahead, someone would have said, well, that one makes no sense whatsoever. What happened to that piece of, and we know which piece of equipment, we know who the operator was, we know the range of time it was in there, but that amount of time, it looked like they turned the equipment off and went to the movies and came back. I mean, I don't know what happened, but it's clear that that point doesn't make any sense, and we should have procedures in place that when those things happen to figure it out. You might also look at the earlier point in the other color line, but in the rest of them, they tend to follow a pattern that makes sense. And so one of the things we learned is when the pattern doesn't make sense, we should figure out what it is. Did that equipment break on site and it was 2-hour repair? Well, all we know, going back, is we know it entered an HOA at this time, and we know it left an hour and a half, I'm just guessing from the chart, an hour and a half later. But that's not a reasonable amount of time for that small storm.
Can you go back one slide?
Sure.
What are the two at the top that are sort of using more time?
The East Meadows and KMA,
East Meadows and Cannon, thanks.
Yeah.
the 2 largest contracts. Yeah, so just to reiterate, so consistency across storms. The data is generally consistent with the anomalies identified by Bob, but the results are dependent on when we start or stop a storm. Jess just says when snow stops falling, but as Dave mentioned, we continue to remove snow well after the snow is stopped. Depends on the type of snow, as he also talked about, and wind conditions, which he alluded to. And the plowing continues after the storm is over. So a little bit about our GPS equipment. This is the vendor specifications that were presented to the district when this equipment was purchased. Up to 6.6 feet of accuracy in one of the devices we use, and 8.2 feet of accuracy in the other device we use. And so we did our own testing. So
That's plus or minus feet.
that's plus or minus feet, yes, sir. Yeah, that was the feet range. So accuracy depends on what's called the horizontal dilution of precision, or HDOP. It's determined by the number of visible satellites and their spacing across the sky. So the more birds that are flying, the better the signal in theory is. So they have 4 different ratings, HDOP ratings from excellent to poor. The value is calculated again based on the number of satellites and their spacing. And so in our testing, where we were able to get the satellite data after our test and equate it to notice visible variations in feet. When HSTOP is poor, our average error is 162 feet, ranging from 37 to 250 feet. When it's fair, the average error is 90 feet, ranging from 12 to 195. When it's good, the average error is 58 feet, ranging from 8 to 168. And when it's excellent, the average error is 48 feet, ranging from 2 to 99 feet. Other reasons for differences in accuracy: GPS installation location. The district modified between test 1 and the subsequent tests the location of the GPS unit in our trackless devices. Obviously the HSTOP, the number of satellites available, geographical and tree interference, and landmark delineation. We did expand, based on the recommendation of the vendor, some landmarks between test 3 and subsequent tests. So what we've done to improve accuracies, we've relocated our GPS units. We've expanded the landmarks, which makes them more error tolerant. We've tested multiple GPS units, and we've corrected various minor errors that we've encountered over time as we've done this testing. Bottom line is there are slight variations in accuracy that are substantively the same across the entire valley. So the percent share methodology with similar accuracy for all customers means there's no meaningful percent allocation change. Other planned improvements. Sure.
Just to comment on that a little bit more. So I was shocked at how bad some of the reporting was, because I'm used to my iPhone, and I figured, well, if this is a production system, then for commercial use, it should be at least as good in an iPhone. And we did this testing in September and in August.
Correct.
I'm perfectly clear. There was no. I don't know to what degree storms interfere anyway, but there was no.
There was no bluebird days.
These are perfectly clear days, and we had some point of poor. It was listed as poor, and so we were listed as being on the wrong street. So clearly when the GPS falls below a certain level, the data is useless, that what's coming in. And I for one, did not realize how bad some of it is, but we have ideas on how to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which goes to which goes into our next thing, and we've already made some of these changes. So we've eliminated storm entry overlap. That's been fixed. We've added a testing and training mode. So when Dave is training all his operators, the devices will be turned to a test training mode, which there will be no charge to individual contracts. It will just be put into the big overall bucket of snow removal, which is one of Bertrand's comments. So that's now happened. We've now implemented that.
Could you go back? What is storm entry overlap?
Oh, it's so that was where we had two. That was the two units that.
The goal of the storm buckets, the snow event buckets, is they don't overlap. You finish one, then you start the next. But there was no check for that, so there was one data entry for which they had an overlap. So we're just trying to prevent any error in entering that.
So we've added the testing training mode, which is going to eliminate that. That'll just go to general snow removal across all customers. After each storm, Dave and Joe Pellerin will be reviewing all the data and confirming whether or not the data is correct. And they now have the ability to make manual data adjustments based on what actually happened in that particular storm. So the Edelweiss bump you saw on that one slide would be corrected under our new protocols. We are going to be identifying HSTOP in particular storms to eliminate the poor fair readings, and again rely on operators out in the field in terms of their feedback of what's really happened to eliminate those poor to fair readings. We're going to implement set routes, which 3 routes, an east side, a west side, and a central or commercial. That's going to improve the efficiency of our operators. One loader will go through and hit the roads. This goes to your question, sir. And then the tracklesses will follow behind and hit every driveway after the loader's gone through. So now that we have 3 loaders, we can run these 3 routes, and then the tracklesses will follow behind and just hit everybody in order. And that also and I'll say this, hitting the driveways in order, following behind the loader, if I hit driveway A, driveway B, driveway C, but my data shows I hit driveway A and driveway C, Dave's going to correct that because he knows he hits A, B, C. He doesn't skip one. So we'll be able, unless there's a vehicle in the parking lot, and again, that's going to go back to his data correction. So we'll be able to identify those issues and correct those as well. Operator detection, correction of landmark errors. Again, we're going to be able to improve our landmarks as we go through this too with this constant review. Any things that stand out as problems, we're going to be able to identify them and fix that as well. And then one thing we didn't know that we now know is if our vehicle doesn't make a 20-degree turn, it doesn't register. Right now, data is provided every minute unless there's a 20-degree actuation of the vehicle. So when we plow a driveway, we go like this. That's 8 degrees of actuation. So it's not identifying that. So now we're going to go in, come out, make a 90, go back in, come out, make a 90. That's one of the things that Dave's going to be training his operators on this year, and then we're going to be implementing as well. Anything you want to add to that, Bob? So pricing methodology. Snow removal contracts consist of fixed and variable costs, as everyone understands. The variable costs are relatively small versus the fixed costs. And our variable costs include our seasonal laborers, our seasonal snow removal operators, any overtime, and our fuel. And in the last contract period, it was about $73,000. Our fixed costs are our permanent labor, Dave, Joe, Greg, our equipment, our G&A, and our overhead, which is about $385,000. So cost per hour will always be higher in low snow years, showing that it's not a meaningful indicator because we have these fixed costs that happen whether or not we have a big storm year or a small storm year. Items that impact snow removal is location. Snowfall in Kirkwood is not uniform. Dave relayed to me yesterday that he's seen storms where there's half an inch on Hawkweed and 5 inches on Dangberg in the same storm event. It's just not uniform across the valley. So snow removal, therefore, is not uniform. Even in a single storm event, elevation, shading, wind conditions can increase snow removal or decrease snow removal for neighbors. Square footage is part of the complexity, but slopes, obstacles, storage, as Dave's talked about quite a bit, and snowdrift can cause different conditions between neighbors. So just to give you a quick example of that, and Dave, I'll let you talk about this a little bit, if you would.
Just another example of a driveway. In a full scope photo, you would see the driveway on about 20 feet to the left of that also. Big wall bank on the right side. As we know, banks already take up snow storage. In a low snow year, that bank on the right side is going to be 30 feet taller. Our machines can only throw it so far, different areas. If we continue to do that, if you looked at the upper part, you'd be burying roof sheds and stuff, which would create property damage for the owner. So in this area, it's a house right before the cul-de-sac down on Hawkweed, so that snow all gets blown back behind you, over your shoulder, into the roadway, into a cleared area in a cul-de-sac, which is designated snow storage.
And then on a good house example,
This is another one up on Juniper Ridge. It's a flat, easy driveway. It's a south-facing driveway. Lots of snow storage on the left side. The roof's not going to shed into the area where we're blowing snow, so we're not keeping snow on the house, causing property damage. Just overall a perfect driveway, but we don't design them, we don't build them. We're just asked to do snow removal on them. So every one is a challenging, different driveway.
and it just goes to the point that we've made before, all driveways are not created equal, and these driveways are about the same square footage. So again, square footage is a component, but it's not the end-all be-all, as you can see. So another thing we were asked to look at was a formula-based. It's potentially accurate, but we'd have to consider all the factors that we've talked about: slope, elevation, snow storage, and plowed as a base service, plowed via established routes. There could be customer requests outside of the routes at a per hour additional charge, or we could eliminate customer requests and we do it like every other snow removal company in the continental U.S. and they are plowed on a route. And that's,
And you called them all.
I've gone to a lot of websites and so has Rick, a lot of phone calls, and that's no joke. I mean, Colorado, and I even called Maine. We made some calls and checked some websites. I mean, if you look at South Lake Tahoe, we'll plow you between 3 and 8 a.m. once a day. That's what you get, and that's the norm. Truckee Donner is the only one that is a little bit of anomalous. They use GPS as well, but they do establish routes with the GPS, which is what we're proposing as well. Request-based, it's simply not feasible to only plow when people request it. There's a snow accumulation, as Dave's talked about. Different snow creates different conditions. Ice could create safety hazards, equipment and staff availability if all the customer requests came in at once, and it's just an inefficient use of staff time to do it that way. So our proposed improvements, we've talked a little bit about these, but set plowing routes. That's what we're going to implement this year. We're going to rotate the starting point each day so that this person who got plowed first today is not first tomorrow. They'll be second, and it'll rotate through until they're last, and then they'll be first again. It's an equitable way of distributing snow removal on the set routes. Customer requests, we will notify customers that call in within the established routes. If Bob calls in and says, when's my driveway going to be plowed, we'll radio to Dave or Joe and say, where are you out on your route? We'll be able to look at a map and say, within an hour, or they hit it an hour ago. We'll be able to communicate that to the customers so they know where they stand on the route in that particular day. GPS, we talked about this, operator review and correction with each storm event and the testing training mode that's already been implemented. There was a spreadsheet error identified in the snow removal allocation this year. It was a 4% underestimate in East Meadows. That will be corrected for the 12 HOAs that were impacted by that. In their next contract, they will be provided a credit relative to that error that was found, and I thank Bertrand for finding that.
That's the error where the driveways were not.
That is correct.
Not properly subtracted.
Correct. So we'll be correcting that in the next contract. It impacted 12 of the 22 HOAs in terms of a credit due because of the 30% cap on the others. And then one of the recommendations we have is that we reevaluate the allocations every 3 years. This goes to comments received from Judy and Nancy about predictable pricing for the HOA budgeting process. That we'll look at this every 3 years instead of every year and making any adjustments every 3 years. Just to give you an idea what the routes look like, this is the west route. Obviously, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is how they will plow it, but that 1 will be a different one every day. 2 will become 1, 3 will become 2, etc.
How long does that take?
We've not done the routes yet. It's somewhere between 4 and 8 hours, depending on the storm event. That's our estimate, I think.
The whole thing done?
To get the whole thing done. That's correct, including driveways. Yeah. So that's our estimate, is between 4 and 8 hours. And again, if it's 4 inches an hour, we're in triage mode and we're just going to be hitting roads and not driveways. This is the east side route, and then the commercial route, which is a little more complicated. So.
That's the west side, right? That's the west.
Oh, sorry. I'm moving on my computer, not moving on there. There we go. That's the convoluted one, which is the central commercial route. And with that,
Side routes real quick?
oh yeah, absolutely.
And how long does that one take?
It'd be about the same, about 4 to 8 hours. That's how we did these, is that they could be done 1 or 2 times in a shift. Obviously, if we have a big storm coming in, we're going to be running a night crew, which, again, so then that expands it. If we, these guys gear up, they watch the weather. I mean, they're weather nerds. And we had, I think, 5 times last year we geared up for it, and only 2 of those storms materialized, but we have people geared up and ready to go, working, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shifts. And so with that, we'll open it up to questions. Bob, did you want to add anything that I forgot? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm here a lot during the week, and there's nobody else here.
Yeah.
And so if I need to get out, would I still be able, I haven't done this yet, because they're pretty quick getting everything cleared, so I never had a problem. But if I say, hey, instead of 4 hours, could you get me first today? I know there's not many people here. would that be something you could do?
We're going to try and stay with the established routes, and
Okay.
if it becomes a problem, that's something we'll look at.
Yeah.
Obviously, medical emergencies and things like that we'll address, but yeah,
Okay.
we're going to try and stick with the routes. We don't anticipate a huge.
Let me just add on to that. We still have the ability on the website for you to say, this is the range of time I plan on leaving. So that will be transmitted.
Yeah.
So if there is some adjustment that,
There's some wiggle room, they'll still work with it.
right,
Oh, yeah.
so transferring the information will be done.
Yes.
But the conditions under which we can acknowledge, deal with it,
Yeah.
that'll depend. And we'll learn
Yeah.
how to do it better.
So, Bob, that'll work the same, I'm used to sending a message 24 hours before I intend to arrive on
Yeah.
mid-afternoon on Friday, and I've always found that I'm plowed to my driveway at that point within Lost Cabin. So I can still continue to do that, but it'll be executed within this route structure,
Yeah,
which I
that's the
won't, which I won't know about, but it'll still be executed.
The operators-
We will actually let you know within if someone makes a request, we're still going to respond and give you an ETA of our estimated snow removal time based on where we are on the routes on that particular day when we're going to hit Lost Cabins in your case.
Well-
But I'm usually doing it 24 hours in advance. 'cause
Right, but they're going to know what the route's going to be for the whole week. It's going to
Okay.
keep moving
So you will-
assuming it's in a storm event, they're going to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, but notifying people when we expect to do it would be new, because we currently don't necessarily do that. But the goal here, we're still is to have you provide the information, and then we can see what we can do with it. And I think the proposal is, if we can't make that if we know we're not going to make it happen, have some way to inform you about it. But how that's all going to work.
We're probably going to utilize Kathy for that, essentially, as those come in. She's the keeper of the requests and the work orders. for
Well, you
staff.
get a text message.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
the intake, and then
Yeah.
Kathy will be responsible for the reply to inform the customer of when the anticipated plow is.
Well, I certainly suggest that based on past expectations from past experience, that you somehow educate us as to how it's going to work prospectively. One other question I've been saving up, and it's not very big, is that I didn't understand the 20% actuation change.
Yeah, so if the vehicle plows like this,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't record, it records once every minute. The vehicle actually has to move 20 degrees, and a 20 degree to its previous location in the fleet tracker to take a new reading, because it will record every 2 seconds? Every 2 seconds if that's moving. So it just gives more accurate GPS data in terms of entry and exit.
So it gets you better data.
Correct. Yeah, it gets us more data. Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
You're the boss.
So I have several questions and a comment. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate this. Wish it could have been done a little bit sooner, but I think it's helpful all the way around. Can the presentation be emailed out?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. When Dave was talking about design issues regarding driveways, I guess I'm a little confused because I know in KMA, we require people's plans to come before the PUD. And so to me, what I don't understand now is, so if there is potentially issues regarding snow storage or snow removal, why aren't those things caught earlier on?
We have no authority relative to land use. We're not a land use agency, so all we review for is utility issues when those plans come to us, and fire is the other issue that they review. We can't tell someone to redesign something based on snow storage. We have no authority to do that.
So I look to you, Bertrand. I always thought in our planning committee, that's one of the things that KMA's planning committee does, comes to, and it's always been read, as far as I know, to say, give the thumbs up or the thumbs down regarding the snow removal and snow storage. So this is a brand new piece of information.
I'd like to say on that, you don't have authorities, but we do as an HOA. That means we are, and in the past, already planned.
Oh, yeah,
that
absolutely, I agree.
Yeah.
You have the authority.
So we ask KMPUD, what do they think about the snow storage issues, and now and snow removal. So, and we never had actually a negative comment on any project. So we accept that. But since you are the expert, it'd be nice to give us feedback so we can actually say, no, we need to change that because the driveway is an issue. And since difficult driveways actually impact everyone because they add to the cost of the operation.
It's definitely something we can, I think that's something
that's
that
what we've
maybe
done forever,
KMA and
it's not
us should
surprising.
meet about and talk
It's
about.
clearly a hole that we want to. Because if you look at Cornice Court, it looks like it was designed to maximize snow removal costs. I can't think of a single thing that couldn't also have been done to make it worse. And I don't know if there was a way around it. I don't know, but that is a hole. I agree with you that we want to fix.
Speaking as an architect who has not only designed one up here, but reviewed a bunch of them, as when I was on the Architectural Control Committee, there are often like in East Meadows, you got to have a driveway. In KMA, you could just probably say, sorry, you can't have a driveway. But in East Meadows, you have to have a driveway. For our house, there was one option, and only one option, to comply with all the requirements. It is what it is. There was no other option. And my guess is, like with the steep one with the retaining wall, the one that's the house across from Rich's house, my guess is they had very little option. The building envelope is set, the maximum slope of driveway is set, the road is set, so your beginning elevation is set. You've got to hit an average height of buildings, so where your pad is set. There are not a lot of options. So you may say, please tell us that the retaining wall shouldn't be. Okay, so you say to the designer, you can't have a retaining wall. Then basically you're saying, well, you can't have a house.
And that might be true, but at least we have tried to see if there's something.
Okay.
I think the feedback is useful, and up to now we never had any pushback. And yes, we cannot prevent it, but we can tell us, and then the HOA can say, no, this is not something we support.
So what I would like to do is take this offline and let's get a meeting with KMA's, ceremony committee or whoever and us, and we'll work out how we can help you with that. But I have no problem doing that. I just have no authority. But as Bertrand says, you have the authority. I want to just because people emailing in, I wanted to. Sorry, Nancy.
You said you had 4 questions.
Oh no, she had more.
But so the other question I have is regarding snow stakes and the metal ones and the plastic ones. So the HOAs have to pay for those, but you all are the folks that are damaging them. So I'm confused about that. So, you're...
Well, it's not necessarily true that we're the ones doing all the damage. Let's be fair about that. You don't think there's a person that's driving and hitting them in your subdivision?
I would say 80% at least of the snow stake are damaged by the blower, at least.
Well, I think that's fairly inaccurate because then it comes down to longevity too. On the high side, on the west side, there's bigger banks and the snow creep on stairs, roofs, anything, especially snow stakes over time. They have notches in them where we tie wire to the stakes. That becomes fatigued. They break. People slide into them. Contractors in the summertime run over them all the time. So it's not just normally equipment.
I'm here often. I've seen the blower going through
I'm
snow
not
stakes
gonna
several
deny.
times. I've never seen people driving into the berm and the snow.
I've been doing it for over 25
Because
years.
usually the berm
I've seen
prevent the
all
people.
cases.
You guys are the guy plowing and removing the berm. And that's why I understand it's
And
difficult.
we try to identify when we put
Yeah.
the snow stake numbers out there, what is our responsibility? We don't charge you guys in the past for all of them. We take into account what we go, this was a snow blower, these are these, and these are other reasons, so.
Well, I completely disagree. Damaged snow stakes are part of the effort. It's part of the game.
True.
As
invisibility.
Yeah, how are you going to avoid it? You can't. It's a cost of doing business. It's a cost of having it done. Come on, Bertrand.
I could see your point on the snow stake,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, when you say you have a mechanical damage on the driveway or a specific HOA and one equipment stay idle for 30 minutes, that's part of the business as well, I disagree.
Well, we're just trying to collect information at this meeting, right?
So I have one last question. So if I understood you, Bob, that dark line that went up and that was a anomaly there, that
Yeah.
there was an issue. So in other words, taking, it a step further. So if there's an equipment failure that occurs in a particular area and the thing is sitting there and it takes a couple of hours to fix, that's charged to the district or is that charged to the HOA?
My only point was that thought at that point didn't make sense, and we should, after each snow event, look at those and figure out what happened and make an adjustment. That was my only point about that. That we can look for things that are just outside of the range of normal and have the operators figure out what happened.
And that's part of why we're implementing the review after each storm. So if something does break down, that's going to be identified. And if it breaks down, and it depends on the reason it breaks down. If it breaks down because of a mismarked car, that's, or things like that versus breaking a shear pin versus, a hidden obstacle. All those things will depend on how that's allocated. I did want to read a quick question, Stanish, if I could, since someone emailed it in. It was Carolyn emailed in. She wanted to clarify regular shift versus overtime, because we did talk about that. So generally we run between 10 and 12-hour shifts during major storm events. Overtime is anything over 40 hours. So that's where you'll see the overtime, not based on a particular shift in a day. That's our alternative winter work schedule. Is that correct? That's some of that about right?
Yeah, we try to manage it depending on how long the storm cycle is going to be and the storm. Obviously, we need to be out there when it's snowing, and then when it's not, we don't. So we manage that 40 hours during the storm cycle so we can manage the overtime, which is the biggest killer in budgeting.
And I will note we cut overtime dramatically this last season. So, and although it wasn't a big snowstorm.
Eric Standish has a couple
Yeah.
questions.
Two, half as many as Nancy. One is GPS accuracy. Does Tahoe Donner use the same GPS equipment as we do? And, what's behind my question is that I think that the accuracy that you're reporting there is extremely poor. And I went around with my little handheld GPS yesterday and kind of came up with it is extremely poor. When GPS was originally introduced for consumer use 25, 30 years ago, the government intentionally degraded it from their 50 feet plus or minus to 500 feet. And it's now in the 10 to 20 feet. So that's just not good enough. So it's a two-part question. What are you doing to improve GPS accuracy, number one? And number two, does Tahoe Donner use the same vendor, and what has their experience been?
I don't know what I'll answer the second first. I don't know what they use. I just know that they use GPS, so I'll find out the units they're using and their relative level of accuracy. As to your second point, I agree the accuracy is not the bill of goods that the district was sold.
It's terrible.
But I think with the routes and the per storm review, it becomes a moot point, because then it's just another indicator that's going to be reviewed by staff, after each storm event and correcting any anomalies, which Bob's not given us the ability to do in report server.
I guess my point is if it's garbage in, no matter what you do with the garbage, it's still not good.
Well, let me take my view on that. I think when it's reporting good or excellent, it's within the range that we can get the right answer with, and I'm not worried about it. When it reports fair and poor, then I question whether the data is of any use or not. So the last run we did, there was a small number of minutes where that fell into that category. I think we can look to see whether there's vendors that do it better, but also if we can capture when it's quality, then we can deal with it. But I think we should have an effort to improve the quality of the signal that we're getting, and then an effort to detect when it's not performing at a level that lets us get the right answer. Most of the time, it gets the right answer. But we want to know I think there's a way to figure out when it's not doing the right answer, and I can't believe it's at the level that we've discovered, and I just don't remember it being that way when we started. So I think that's a worth investigation.
I'd like to make a comment also about the GPS. I mean, it's also all about location that we talk about. I mean, Tahoe, Donner, a lot of other places aren't in a little valley that's surrounded by big ridges. They have more open space, more satellite areas, and more satellite that can be viewed by the GPS system. So, I mean, some of it comes down to the special area that we're in and the accuracy of the GPS system.
Yeah, but that's why I brought this up, is it shows the feet of noise,
Right.
which was between 10 and 16 feet, and it shows the number of satellites that this could see, which all of yesterday afternoon, and maybe today is different, was 12 satellites.
Right.
And when I first started with handheld GPS for marine navigation purposes 25 years ago, if you could get 5 or 6, you won. So I brought this up because Bob and I had that discussion about, do these mountains impact it? And at least for yesterday afternoon, the answer was clearly no.
And it depends on time of day and where the satellites are.
My second question was, why evaluate it every 3 years, other than to give KMA a reliable budget number? You know, it seems to me this is very much of a work in progress process. In May, when we had this initial meeting, we had, 2 years of GPS data, and we had managerial operator assessment of degree of difficulty for each HOA. And, it seems to me if we're only 2 years into it, and we have this type of GPS data and errors that we're finding, we should evaluate it every year.
I think I would agree with that sentiment, except that the operator feedback, which they did in a blind taste test, they never saw the GPS data before they gave their assessment of a rough percentage of time, was relatively consistent with what the GPS showed.
There are inconsistencies as well. So maybe I can make a general comment. First, I want to thank the board and the different person involved in addressing the questions, because clearly there was a number of questions that needed to be answered, and at least we are getting there. Second, my biggest grip for last year actually, is we use the data weighted by the GPS data. We have huge discrepancies between the 2 years. Then we have operator feedback, and instead, and we have no square footage. So we should have average the GPS data, use the operating feedback, and use some square footage to do something more reasonable. When you look at the data, I was able to point out a number of obvious problems, which I share with everyone. But that means there is also some problems that are not obvious. And we know it's accurate some of the time, but it's not accurate always. So we cannot use a system like that to do pricing. We can use it as a factor, but this year it has been used as a major pricing indicator. And I have a big problem with that. And for next year, now we are hearing, I'm still surprised we don't have a base fee as well. Because you don't talk about base fee for next year. Because I think this whole question here is to be able to do better next year and have a system that is going to be more reliable and acceptable. So we have base fee for water, we have base fees, and you actually show how much of fixed cost you have. That should actually be reflected by having a base fee. That's why we have such a high base fee on the sewage system. It's because we have huge fixed cost. Why don't we have a base fee on the cost of the snow removal? I don't understand. It seems obvious. You do it on every single service that we have so far. We don't do it for the snow removal.
Well, that's actually my proposal. But the base fee, we know the total cost we have to allocate, and now we need to know the percentages. I would do it based on a 3-year average of level of effort, which is what we do for EDUs, which is how we compute the base fees. Is to look if one driveway had an exceptional problem this year and they don't in the others, taking a 3-year average, I think, is probably a reasonable approach, and it's consistent with the others.
So then we have an issue of efficiency. So the cost per hour keep increasing. I mean, if I take my own case as a driveway, my cost per hour was $1,250. I had about 1 hour and 2 minutes on my driveway, and I'm being charged $12.92. 27% of the time the machine came, there was no snow on my driveway. And I have photo to prove it. So that means basically I was paying $1,500 for 1 hour of service. So I think cost per hour is maybe not relevant for you guys, it's certainly relevant for the customer. And I think we need to keep that in mind.
For
Sure.
clarification, are you saying that you only had 1 hour spent on your driveway for the whole?
Yes. I was told this is the most difficult driveway, but I've seen driveway way more difficult than mine actually, in the slide that you show. And yeah, they only spend 1 hour on my driveway. It's very difficult, but still done in 1 hour. So that's kind of interesting. Huh? And $1,292 is the cost I'm paying for. To me, and so that's one example. Some other people are going to pay $300, $400 on their cost per hour. So clearly, there is some problem in the driveway spreadsheet. I've never got the data, so I could not analyze it. I got the data for the HOA, but without any indication of where actually the machine were. So I made a comment that several times on KMA, we saw snow removal equipment packed. Some of the time there was not even someone in it, for half an hour, 20 minutes. And this is not training. I don't know what it is. And actually I asked what it is. What was going on? Was it a mechanical breakdown? But sure enough, we've been charged for it. So I disagree that mechanical breakdown should be actually charged to the user the way it is now. You guys need, if you have some machine that broke down and stay half an hour on a specific HOA, you need to curate that data out, and I'm very pleased to see that now you have a curation system that could take care of that stuff. But again, for last year, that's not the case.
Prashant,
Yes?
you say there was equipment in your driveway for 30 minutes?
No. Yeah, not on my driveway. My
Oh.
driveway happened once 5 minutes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it happened once. Actually, the guy stopped on my driveway for 5 minutes, not sure. On Danbury, on Fremont, several times we had issues for the HOA, where the system was packed.
Okay, so this is a question I guess I've got for you, but also for people who know, Dave probably. One of the things that Bertrand has brought up a number of times is this issue, that the equipment breaks down or for whatever reason, and you gave a bunch of reasons why that might happen, right? The implication I'm hearing from Bertrand is that it only happens in KMA but doesn't happen elsewhere.
Actually, I didn't see it in others. I didn't say
No,
it only happened
well,
in KMA.
so my question,
I never said that.
but my question is, in your experience, are those kinds of breakdowns, whenever they happen, however they happen, somewhat evenly distributed across the valley, or does it mostly happen in one HOA versus another HOA?
No, it's spread out between associations and stuff. I mean, it's something I can't tell you when it's going to break down.
No, I know, but I'm just, in general, because this is an allocation by percent of time spent, not you're charged for those 30 minutes.
It has to be curated. It should be logged. There was a problem, 30 minutes, and remove it from the HOA. It's not that complex, actually.
Well, but then you'd be removing it from every HOA.
Yeah, sure.
And then what? The allocations are the same.
No, actually, that's
The
not
percentages
true.
are the same.
That's not true because, it's not such a big event. I mean, it doesn't happen so often that it is spread uniformly. I totally disagree with that.
Oh, okay, that's why I'm asking the experts. Are these
Well,
events somewhat...
Give me that, I can do statistics on it.
Are
Then I'll show you the
these
result.
events somewhat evenly distributed across HOAs, or is it primarily in one HOA because it's got more difficulties or something, or I don't know why it would be.
It is spread out throughout the HOAs and stuff, but there is a concern on the west side is, to be honest, there's a lot more hazards and stuff on that side. The roads aren't maintained, people have been there longer,
have
they
very
leave
good
wood
roads.
out there. There's a lot more things that we run into on the west side is not being maintained as well as other contracts and HOAs.
Our roads,
Sides of the road, there's no drainage, rocks come out, I mean, there's all types of things that are considered, but that HOA and the roadways and snow removal is not maintained as well as other associations.
So I guess I would just say, in response to that, I'm disappointed in the district that you haven't reached out to the HOA to say, these are issues, and maybe we could work together to solve them. This is the first time I'm hearing this. How long have I been here? Holy cow.
Can I answer your question, Eric, on terms of time? We had 51,000 total minutes last year, over 51,000. How long's the average breakdown?
I mean, for shear pins, if it's not super mechanical, probably 5 minutes, 5 to 10.
And we probably had how many shear pins? We probably break about, 3 every storm.
Wet storms, they will break 20 shear pins in an 8-hour shift.
So, even adding all that up, so, let's say, what was our major storm events?
March.
So, yeah. So, you're looking at, maybe 1,000 minutes?
Yeah,
Maybe
but
2,000
that-
minutes out of 51,000. So,
Yeah.
in terms of the allocation, Bertrand is right in a pure mathematical sense that allocating it to the big pot of everybody versus an HOA does make a difference. It's decimal dust, though, relative to the value, relative to the overall amount, though.
I'm just suggesting for the purpose of this exploratory meeting that we include charging for breakdowns as one of the considerations of how we want to handle that.
Yeah.
That's all I'm suggesting. I think
Okay, that's a good idea.
easy to solve.
Yeah.
You log it, and then you curate the data accordingly. I mean, clearly, mechanical breakdown can happen anywhere. No one should should have to bear that the weight because it happens there.
Unless it was due to something relative to the HOA or the driveway owner. Unless they
Yeah.
had a car or they left their contractor delivered a pile of wood we didn't know about, then that should be charged to those contracts, in my opinion.
And I'm glad the next point was the issue of the driveway, HOA being charged for the travel time to specific driveway because of the way the polygons work. Next year should be much better since you have routes and you are going to try to follow the routes so this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. And it was clearly not acceptable that you charge your HOA for specific request of the homeowner. Accuracy of the GPS is a problem. In a storm, I'm talking about physical storm here, but a solar storm would affect the GPS accuracy. So, and actually each time there is a big blast on the sun, you get a warning from the various governmental agencies that the GPS signal is going to be degraded. So we are talking about, in good condition, 48 to 162 feet for accuracy. And at some point, you cannot say it's going to average out. I mean, we keep average out everything, but the fact is what we are doing is garbage in, garbage out. Again, we should have square footage. We can use GPS as a factor to amend and correct. Operator feedback is a great, actually I trust this operator feedback much better than the GPS at this stage. I think, again, things are going to be better next year and maybe the year after. At some point, we'll be able to rely more. But last year was definitively jumping the gun, and that was not proper. So that, and I see that 4% of the East Meadow adjustment is due to the fact that the driveway were not actually accounted for.
Correct.
I still have a little problem with that, because homeowners everywhere in the valley pay a higher cost than HOA for snow removal. I mean, 2016 to 2017, HOA average cost was $200 and driveway homeowner was $500. Last year it was $600 for the HOA, it was $900 for the driveway, and mine was 1,300. And so I still have a problem there. It's because because of the internal structure of an HOA, we are charging less for the East Meadow driveway. They should be charged like everyone else, even if you charge to the HOA, but they should be billed separately. And the reason I'm doing that is because the way you do your percentage thing that spread mistakes everywhere, anytime you do mistakes somewhere, it's going to impact everybody. And
The opposite of that, and this is my recommendation, although there's not necessarily agreement from Bob on this at all, but I would flip this 180 from what you said. If I have a large polygon that is just an HOA, it's much easier for me to track and eliminate error. I would propose that KMA consider merging to an East Meadows model, and
Yeah.
you guys allocate the driveways. You can use square footage then. You can use whatever you want. You can use, lineal footage, square footage, pixie dust, I don't care. But that's something, and we're going to be meeting now, it sounds like, so maybe this is something we could talk about, that if you took on the East Meadow model, then you can allocate. Bertrand's driveway has a 2 weighting factor, Frank Majors has a 3, and this driveway has a 1. And maybe you guys, maybe we can help you with that, because you've seen our data, but we can give you older data too to show you how that was allocated. Maybe that's something we could consider.
I'm open with that concept. I think basically what I said is everyone should be treated the same, one way or the other.
Right,
It could be done the other way. It could be simpler for everyone, actually.
And we
That
would
would be an
propose this to
improvement.
Palisades
I agree.
and Juniper Ridge as well. I think there's some merit to it, because
Yeah.
if I have a larger landmark, if I'm not grabbing multiple driveways next to each other, I'm just grabbing a large landmark, my error is reduced. Obviously, we're going to be reducing error by operator validation. But if I'm using a large landmark versus multiple small, I think that eliminates a lot of the concerns that have been voiced by KMA. So, my 2 cents.
And
My 2 cents is we can't require the HOAs
No, you
to be
cannot, but you
responsible.
can-
But if any HOA wants to include the driveways in their contracts, that's easy for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we
we
can't
don't care.
require it, but we could stop offering individual driveway service, forcing them to go to that model.
Question for Dave.
I think that's kind of mean.
Kind of mean. Have you met me, Bob?
For Dave, how does an operator validate operation time?
What was that?
How does he record operation time?
Look
How is
back
that-
at-
I'll answer that because we haven't done it yet. We haven't implemented it yet. So I will be printing out the data which comes out, entry time, exit time of driveways, and it's in a time stamp order, and he'll be able to look at that and review that relative to his routes. So he'll have the customer's name, the time in, time out, and if a customer skipped, well, we know we're not skipping anyone anymore, he's going to be able to identify that issue.
So this way you'll be able to curate your GPS data.
Somewhat curated, but yes, curated. Does that make sense?
It does, and then it was, as Bertrand followed up, that will be used then as the means by which to determine next year's estimate for snow removal,
That is correct.
rather than GPS.
It'll be using the curated GPS still, but it'll take out the component. Right now, as Bertrand said, we averaged the last 2 GPS years plus the operator. It was an equal weight. It was a third. And your thing was it should have been half and half, but I understand.
Yeah.
So it was a third. The operator feedback will be taken out of it because now the GPS data will be curated by storm, such that he's going to be going through storm by storm, fixing the data if there's any errors, such that I don't need him to go, well, how much time do I have? I think it's about 30% over here. No, it's going to be, he's doing it by storm when he's actually spending time in there.
So this is a great improvement. I think you'll be amazed to see the number next year, and we'll be all happy. I'd like to.
I want to write you down.
Okay.
Do you want to sign it, or just make it a gentleman's
I wanted to finish by actually
still writing,
acknowledging
just
that
a second.
snow removal is difficult. And I want to acknowledge snow removal is difficult with all the description you've explained, and I have no problem with that. My problem was two-pronged. First, costs keep going up. I mean, we've made investment, the community made investment, 1.2 million in equipment, 1 million plus in building, and we still keep paying more even if this investment has been made. So something is weird here. And the second thing is GPS accuracy is not accurate. I mean, it's not accurate as it is today. So you cannot just use that mostly like we've done this last year.
Just to respond to that first comment, is there anything in your life that's going down in costs with right now? Is there anything? And the other thing I'll tell you is we're getting hit with 8 to 12% tariffs coming in. We've been notified by every one of our vendors, 8 to 12% tariffs on all steel and iron. That's going to be a huge impact to snow removal. I will tell you right now. We've just ordered a blade that we had budgeted for, and luckily it came in under our budgeted amount. But we've been told all our chains for all of our equipment is going to hit. That's a 12% on that one, right?
And could be 25.
And could be 25
come January.
later. So I understand your comment about costs going up, but again, this is the real world. Nothing goes down in costs ever, much as we would like it to.
Actually, I have no problem with your 4% increase. It's not that my concern. My concern is the increase in the cost per hour, which is due to the difference in snow. I agree, but I think and actually what I've heard, it's happening. There is a definite concern to improve efficiency, and that's the way you can actually manage your cost per hour. And I really applaud that the PUD is doing this effort now.
Thank you.
And again, yes, it's difficult. We don't deny that. We know.
I did get
But
an email
that's only
question.
going to affect the variable cost, so that's $78,000. There isn't a lot of opportunity to optimize within that. There's some, but there's not a lot.
I have an email question. Is that okay? Carol, and this is actually a relevant question, which goes to what we were kind of talking about with KMA. How would an HOA know what to charge a lot with no driveway? That would be something they'd have to work out. What we can provide the HOAs is, here's the relative amount of time you spent in each of these respective driveways within your HOA over the last umpteen years, and then can help you come up with, as Bob said, kind of an EDU format if you wanted that. And we would offer as a suggestion, not the end-all be-all. It would be up to the individual HOAs as to how they implemented that. So I understand East Meadows doesn't give any credit for no driveway, as poor Standish knows, but KMA could do a different model, and Palisades could do a different model, and Juniper Ridge could do if they wanted to go that way, do a different model. So, but we'd be willing to provide that data to help you with that analysis. And just for everybody listening and online, we've offered to meet with KMA. We're happy to meet with any other HOAs that have any other questions or wants to meet with us and discuss things. We're happy to do that at any time. Outside of the summer festival, me going to the HOA meetings, I'm happy to do anything else any other time. So staff's available for that. So and we can teleconference as well. So for those of you that live out of the area. Sorry, Jeff. Thank you.
One cost that would go down for certain, to answer your question, is if we had 20% increase in economic activity in this valley, our electricity costs would go down significantly. So that's
true.
one answer to your question.
That is true. Touche.
Okay, so I want to wrap this meeting up. Bertram, have you asked all your questions or presented everything you need to?
You're talking to me, yeah.
Yes, I am.
No, as I said, to summarize, I think the presentation I sent was identifying a number of problems. I'm forward-looking rather than backward-looking, and my main concern is for next year at this stage, and I really recommend that the base fee be incorporated in the scheme, and it really makes sense based on the number you have. And that base fee, I would personally use square footage because I think that should still be part of it. Otherwise, you are really depending on a technology that is not that reliable. For this, I mean, again, 50 to 160 feet accuracy in the driveway sometimes are 20 feet long. I mean, there is a disconnect here.
And just for the record, I oppose square footage, so reasonable people can disagree. But what we had is a description of Cornice Court being, however many square feet that is, and snow has to be moved 3 times. And we had our SME, subject matter expert here, sort of say, hey, the plowing in KMA, which I think was designed not to be plowed, okay? is materially more difficult. So just as a board member, I'm going to oppose square footage based base rate
So you don't
methodology.
think square footage is a factor?
I think it's a factor, but I don't think
That's
that's
what
the...
I'm saying. It's a
Okay.
factor. This GPS could be used, but it's a factor also, it's not reliable. So you need
I think
something else.
GPS should be a factor. I think operator and management input should be a factor. And I would be open to square footage as a factor,
Yeah.
but not the determinant. And I'm
That's what
happy to
I'm saying.
see,
That's exactly
and
what
I'm
I'm saying.
happy to see that you've come to this meeting proposing square footage as opposed to lineal feet, which is where you began. So square footage is, yes, you did in May. We were both here. And you were saying, as was Frank Majors, that it should be based on lineal feet plowed.
I never said that.
sorry,
I'll
just-
go back to the video. I'm talking about square footage, always. If I did, I misspoke.
Yeah,
Square
and so let me
footage.
just say on this topic, we do not have the square footage data. We don't have it, we don't know where we would find it. So my input, what?
We could do it quite easily.
Yes.
We do, and we do already have some data that we historically we used. I would
Okay.
recommend that we do measure the square footage of every driveway, every street in Kirkwood as a third database
Yes.
for extra point of reference. It'll either validate or refute the GPS. And why are you afraid to go in that direction? Why are you?
I'm not
It's like
afraid
you're-
of anything.
Well, then why is the resistance to do it? It wouldn't
Because
cost
it-
that much to do it. I would recommend that we hire an independent
But I think number...
contractor to just to
And I
do
think
for a
I think number of
database.
lots in an HOA should be a factor then too.
I'd like to finish my comment.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think with 3 years' worth of data, we have a general sense of level of effort required for each contract. You could take that level of effort and then you can create an EDU system and say the level of effort will be allocated across our fixed costs, and that would give you a baseline. But I think level of effort is what we want to get to, and I think that's really represented in the time required. I've seen nothing in what we've done so far that says we can't improve to the point where we have accurate data. There's, the GPS lands your airplane. It gets you to the place where you're going. There's nothing that prevents us from having accurate data. We don't have it yet, but it's also not that far off. Most of the data we've looked at, it doesn't. It's all reasonable. We can find the outliers behind it and deal with it. So my confidence in our ability to get accurate data that represents time, which is level of effort, is quite high in terms of getting there. I think the square footage is pretty much uninteresting. It doesn't say anything. I mean, we've seen what's going on. It doesn't say much about how much it costs.
It's a moderator. You show us data actually that you have fluctuation from 10 to 40+% of percentage of driveway versus HOA. That doesn't give you pause. I mean, this is a huge discrepancy, 10% to 42%.
No, but it's all a function of how much snow is there and how much time was spent.
But there is more snow on driveways than HOA.
No, that says that most of it's on the HOA because that's where most of the land area is to be dealt with. There's nothing in that I found. In fact, I found it all
find
reassuring.
actually a huge discrepancy. I mean, this thing should be more consistent. And there's no reason that suddenly the HOA, the driveway is only 10% and sometimes it's 40%. It's just a huge difference. I mean, spreadsheet, you can put a scale in such a way it looks pretty good, but you can do it the other way.
We did it linear. I don't think we did anything to try to trick you.
So coming back to, measuring, I can only speak to KMA, but we have what's called a Browning Reserve study. And in that study, and I'm surprised that other HOAs don't have it, you've got on
The
your
square footage.
roads,
Yeah.
we have on our roads and on our parking pads, the square footage. I mean, it is down to the...
Oh,
it's-
yeah. Yeah, it's
pretty
actually
detailed.
72-page document. Every single bit of asphalt has been measured by this independent agency.
Right, and they come and they update it, and, so the information's there.
I think it
That's
should be
important.
considered. I mean, it might help resolve some of this argument that we're having. This is a very contentious issue. The feedback that I'm getting from homeowners is pretty negative. And I know your intentions with this experiment are good, but the result has been very contentious, and it's created a rift between the East and the West that I thought had been solved, that existed years ago, and it's revived it. And I think we need to consider this data. What's the loss? What's the loss in just considering it? That's all I'm asking.
I think the proposals we're putting forward here, even Bertrand's on board with our new proposed
I think
methodology.
it's a great improvement.
I think we see how it comes
Yeah.
back this next year and see what that data looks like. And if there's still points of contention, or if it's inconsistent with the prior 3 years, then we'll talk about it. If it's consistent, then we know that we were relatively correct. But I think give staff a chance to implement this new methodology before we go spending, additional funds to do a method. If this works,
Well, how much money have we spent on trying to validate GPS? I have a figure here of $1,540 already, and it hasn't snowed.
it's 13,000, I believe.
13,000.
Yeah.
And it hasn't snowed yet.
Right. A lot of that's contract negotiations too, and attorney time with certain HOA contracts.
If I could, there's a couple questions that people haven't gotten asked.
I will finish on this square footage. We will provide the square footage, and we could provide a whole report. And each HOA is supposed to go through that process of doing a ground reserve study. So each HOA should have it. And so we will provide to the board the square footage of KMA. And I'd be glad to see the same from East Meadow and others. This data should be shared. Yes.
Use this as a guinea pig.
Yeah, I'm Peter Tuxen. I'm
Peter.
with a sizable group here from the East Meadows side, and we've been very quiet. Waiting to just say, first of all, thank you so much. This has been very educational. You've done, Dave, you did a beautiful presentation there, and I think I learned a tremendous amount. But I just wanted to, so thank you all. But I just wanted to remind you, we sent this letter, I think it was addressed to all of you, about the fact that we feel we've been subsidizing the rest of the homeowners associations to a substantial amount. And we look forward to this change in how things are done in the future, and we'll await your consideration. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
Jack Longinati.
Jack, I'm sorry.
I just want to say I'm with Bob on his points of view here. We just repaved Lost Cabin's parking lot. We had 5 different estimates for square footage. It is not a trivial issue. And I've worked with Browning. Browning will use whatever numbers the HOA gives them. Browning is not a validation of what the square footage is. So for those of you,
Go ahead.
you took a lot of time in this meeting. Can I have my time? So my point of view is the system that's been proposed is terrific. Lost Cabin has no problem with it. We're great supporters of what KMPUD has been doing. I think this has been a terrific effort and education for all involved. Square footage is not something I would validate or endorse as a way to do this, other than as one of the factors in the overall formula. And it's going to be an approximation. Square footage is not by itself an absolute in any of these situations. I just think about our parking area, what fringes do you put in, how close to the garages do you go in a townhouse element, what about the snow storage, etc. We have a parking area that's remote to our base parking lot. How do you take that into consideration? So I think where we're going, where Bob has been pushing us, is the right place to be.
We are fine with 162 feet.
Does anyone else have a comment?
I'm fine with what we're doing right now.
Just like to emphasize the second slide you showed that said this is an optional service and that you can set the fee to any fee you would care to set the fee to. I would just like to emphasize that. It's an optional service.
Thank you.
What will be the cost? Or when people request to get a specific service driveway or even a parking pad from an HOA, how much do you, how are you going to charge? Is that going by the minute? At what cost? Because
Well,
I don't think we're going to do that.
yeah, we're not going to be doing that as a
No,
general rule
okay.
outside of emergencies. There is a provision in everyone's contract for specific services for $175 an hour.
Yeah.
I believe that's right. I think it's 175. Is that what we said? $175 an hour. And you've added or requested a provision be added that homeowners from KMA cannot request parking pad plowing, and we consented to that request, that no homeowner in KMA can request a parking pad to be plowed, and we agreed with that. So
Do we have standard contracts now, or is it one for
We have-
KMA and one for everybody else?
that is correct. We have one for KMA and one for everybody else.
Yeah. I don't support that, but
Do I have any more questions from the audience? From the board?
I just want to appreciate everybody's time for coming here on a Saturday,
And I wanna-
helping us work on this.
Yeah, and I definitely want to acknowledge that Bob and Corey went well above and beyond in helping us with these efforts. They spent a lot of time, as did staff, but they spent a lot of time helping this. And as, Bertrand pointed out issues, Bob was right on, Johnny on the spot, and got those issues fixed where we identified errors. So I'm confident going into next season with the operator validation that we're going to have good, solid data coming into next contract amounts.
Okay, I'd like to thank you, Dave, for your presentation, which was very good, and I'd like to thank everyone for coming and for your comments, and we will close the hearing at this point. Thank you very much.